It's time for Retro Talk with Retro Rose here on
WXPM
on 98.5
FM.
This is Retro Rose with Retro Talk, talking to one of my favorite talents, Kathy Garver from Family Affair. And I'm going to let Kathy say hello.
Hi there, Rose, and hello to all the people in your audience. It's so nice to be here.
And since we have like 45 minutes of chat, I want to make sure I squeeze in everything that you're doing, everything you're working on in the future, and we'll start things off actually with the past, with Family Affair. I would like to hear some of your stories about the filming, about the actors, and if there's anything fun you can share from the show.
Well, we started the first show in 1966. I had been working since I was a child in the Ten Commandments, Night of the Hunter movies, etc. But at the time of Family Affair, I happened to be going to UCLA, and I was in my third year, and I had my same childhood agent, Hazel McMillan, and so she said, well, they have a new series. It's called Family Affair, and it's already been sold, which was unusual then and still today to already have the pilot sold. But there it was, and they had all the cast except for the teenage girl. So they had already started shooting the pilot first episode, and they needed somebody. So my mother called me. I was in the sorority at UCLA. And she says, well, you have an audition today for a new series. And I said, oh, well, that sounds great. And she said, the only thing is they want someone that's blonde-haired and preferably blue-eyed. Well, Rose, you've seen me, and you know I have brown eyes. And at that time, I had dark hair. But my mother, not to be daunted, went out, and she got me this stuff, Streaks and Tips, which you put in your hair, and it instantly changes color. They had these cans back in the 60s. So she thought that she had this problem solved. So she came over to the sorority where I was living at UCLA. She sprayed my hair with this stuff. Now they wanted someone over 18. I was over 18 to play a 15-year-old. So they could use me longer. Children could only work like 8 hours. And if you're over 18, you could work as long as they wanted you to. So they were happy I was over 18, but I was even a couple years older than that. So I put on a very young-looking sweater and skirt. My mother sprayed my hair, and off we went to Hollywood from Westwood to meet the creator, producer, Ed Hartman. And so I'm talking to him, and we're just having a very nice chat. And then all of a sudden he does a double take, and he says, what is wrong with your hair? I said, my hair? Innocently, even though I felt like something had a Goldfinger, and if you knocked on it with like a helmet. Oh, I don't know. He says, well, it's turning green. I said, oh, well, that must be the light or something. Well, we know it wasn't the light. We know it was the spray. But it got us chatting and laughing, and then I did a screen test the next day, and the next day I got the job. And that was the beginning of a Family Affair.
Oh, my gosh.
For me.
Yeah, actually, the story behind it is really awesome because, you know, I honestly didn't know how old your character was. Whenever I've watched your tapes, you know, and I do want to mention that I've watched your DVDs that I bought off of you. And I want people to know that you're selling these. But I didn't realize what age your character was. I knew she was younger. You know, she wasn't of age yet. But it was very much a trick, too. Here comes Buffy. Next thing you know, there's 2 more siblings coming along. And he knew that there was other siblings, right? The character for Brian Keefe's character, actually your uncle, knew that there was other siblings, right?
Yes, that's an interesting point because Jody and I had been pawned off to different relatives. So, and here was this carefree bachelor, but Anissa and Buffy just won his heart. And so then there was the big surprise when our aunt brought over Jody and then me. I was brought by another relative. So
Yeah, I know. And
yeah.
this is like, oh, boom, here you go. So I guess he would be the uncle. He would know that there was other siblings. So
Right.
the whole thing was like this big surprise. Like the first episode I ever watched of it, I thought it was just Buffy. Next thing you know, here comes two more kids. And you know, it's a brilliant idea, but I can only imagine what your bachelor uncle would have thought. It's like, wow,
Well,
here it is.
yes.
But he
And the second episode, he, of course, they were twins, so they had to be together.
yeah.
And then he says, well, I can't have a teenage girl. I mean, twins are enough, little kids, but a teenager? And so he was writing a letter that I overheard to send me back to the person that had brought me. And I went in and I said, oh, okay, Uncle Bill, it's all right. I can understand the kids, but I'm, older and, it's okay. And so then that very touching scene, he says, oh, okay, cancel the letter. And so then I got to stay too. So there was instant family for him.
Yeah, and so I would like to know what it was like with each individual cast member. If there's any fun stories, anything that happened that you could share. And
well, I didn't spend a lot of time with anybody really because we were working every day, and I was the workhorse of the group because I was the one over 18. Brian Keith had this special arrangement that the producer, Don Feddersen, had made with My Three Sons, and so the star of that only had to work like 2 months out of like 6, and he only did the scenes that he was in out of maybe like 3 different episodes per day, and then he could leave because at that time TV was still kind of in its infancy, and it was really, movie stars did not want to do it. They didn't want to be tainted by the little box. And so in order to lure a movie star over like Brian Keith, he promised them, Don Feddersen, he'd only have to work, a couple months and he could go back to do his movies.
yeah.
So that was the deal that we had. And and the kids could only work 8 hours, and Sebastian wasn't feeling well, and many of, in some of the years that we were shooting. So there I was, strong, healthy 18-year-old over, and so I worked a lot. So once you work with somebody all day, every day a week, you want to have some time for your family. Or me, I wanted to have some time to date and to go to some discos.
Yeah.
And so that's, but they were great to work with. Brian was a pro. Sebastian was a pro. The little kids were just kind of acting natural.
They were having fun with it.
Yeah, I had Anissa over a couple times to my house.
Aww.
And we had sleepovers, and she was just a dear little girl.
Aw, I bet you she was really adorable. I've watched like halfway through the season. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. I watch it whenever I'm not working because I think I tell you I work all the time. It's nonstop, it seems like. And but from what I've seen, Sissy actually would have been a great babysitter for the twins too. You wouldn't even need a babysitter. With a teenage sister like that, she could have done most of the babysitting, although it would be a lot of work if the characters are going to school. And like you said, she probably wanted to date. She probably wanted to get out there herself and do some things, but she would have made a great babysitter too.
But we had our Mr. French.
Yeah,
who was great.
And he
looked
actually
after everybody.
He really was a nanny.
Yeah, he was. He turned out to be a nanny.
Yeah, so that show is really fun. I do want to mention though, because whenever you mention 10 Commandments, that was always one of my mom and dad's favorite movies, and I've watched it many times. So you were actually on 10 Commandments too, then?
Right, that was my second movie. I had done The Night of the Hunter with Shelley Winters and Lillian Gish, and Peter Graves, and of course starring Robert Mitchum. Very interestingly to me, they are doing a remake of Night of the Hunter.
Oh.
And that movie was like 1955, or a little earlier. So, and when it first came out, it did not get good reviews. It was Charles Lawton's first movie that he ever directed. It was also his last because it got such bad reviews. And now it's turned out to be one of the top horror films ever made, psychological thrillers. And so now they're going to remake it. And I would love to play the Lillian Gish part now in that movie.
Yeah.
And then the Ten Commandments, I followed that, and that was with Cecil B. DeMille, directed that, with Yul Brynner and Deborah Paget, and of course the great Charlton Heston.
Yes.
And we had scenes together, and that was just, in my office I have all these pictures of the Ten Commandments. I have some collector friends, and they send me pictures, and with me in it, and with Charlton Heston, and it's fun.
Now,
I just look around, and I thought, oh, there they are.
How old were you at the time?
I was 8.
8? Okay. Now, I will have to, it's been about a year or so since I've watched Ten Commandments, because we usually watch it, usually around Easter time. We'll watch a lot of movies like that with my mom. But the Ten Commandments is definitely one of my mom's favorites, one of mine too. And I'm just going to have to watch it again and see your picture. So did you actually get an autograph from Charlton Heston? Was your mom with you? I'm sure she was pretty excited, or one of your parents?
Yes, but it wasn't the right atmosphere to, because we were working to get autographs. But I have this wonderful picture of me and Charlton when I'm on, like, the papier-mâché mountain. And later on, I had them some printed, and I sent some to him, and I asked him, I said, would you be so kind as to sign these? And he was so gracious and sent me a letter and had autographed 10 pictures for me. So that was a treasure, and he was a treasure.
I know that was kind of a geeky question to ask, but a few years back I was interviewing a child star, and I guess he was only like about 12 or 13 at the time, and I was talking to his dad, and I guess his dad and mom geeked out. I mean, they were asking for autographs and getting pictures and everything. So, I mean, I know that's kind of a geeky question, but it was definitely something that crosses my mind, because when the parents get their kids, or their kids get into a movie or something, it's something that the parents dream of too. They want the best for their kids, but it's exciting whenever you have a kid in the business, I'm sure.
Well, my mother, though, she was the opposite of a stage mother. Not that she was obsequious, but she was. And she was always fading into the background, making sure I was all right, and getting me there on time, and making sure I was clean, and doing all of these things. But she was never, ever pushy. And she was really wonderful. She cared about me and cared that I was getting my schooling. She saved every single penny that I ever made from doing television and radio as a child, and movies. So she was an ideal stage mother, not pushy.
Yeah, I've actually heard stories, not to change the subject from Family Affair or anything like that, but I've heard stories like that. I mean, I listen to a lot of documentaries. I'm a big documentary buff, and from what I don't know personally, I've never met the person, but from what I understand from Judy Garland, her mother was very much a pushy person. And I love Judy Garland, but so I listen to a lot of documentaries. They're, like I said, they're not always true, but you never know. You don't, I've heard the same thing with some of the people that were with Little House on the Prairie, that sometimes the mothers were easygoing, sometimes they were very pushy. So I guess it just really depends on the parents, and how they're with their kids and everything.
Right, and for Natalie Wood and some of the others, and some of the child stars would not be adult stars, or made the transition if their parents had, kind of pushed them along the way. However, that is at great harm to the child and the personality of a person. And that's why, I've written like 5 books, and one of my books was Ex-Child Stars, Where Are They Now?
Mm-hmm.
And so many of the kids, to try and make a transition to adult stars, couldn't and didn't, they were depressed.
Yeah.
And they got on drugs. And the drugs were just the demise of many a fine young actor.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of that Hollywood can be very stressful for young people, especially whenever they start out young. And it's just a stressful business sometimes. And sometimes it works out great.
For everybody. From child to ingenues to leading ladies and men to character actors when you get a little older. So, yeah, there's always stress.
Yeah.
And unlike the angst level, the number one is losing a job. Well, actors are losing a job every other month.
Yeah.
They work for a week and then, now what's my next gig? So, yeah, you're right. It's a stressful business.
Yeah, and I mean, the same thing is like when you have a running show that's run like 5 seasons and then all of a sudden it's canceled, it's like, okay, what do I do now? Or where do I go from here?
Exactly.
And and speaking of that, I want to mention your books too. And you actually have a Mrs. Beasley doll, right? That you actually sell, because my mom got one and she loves it. I would like to mention your store, what you sell, some of the books that you've written, like the cookbook and the Child Star book, different things like that, so people can see what you're doing, and also talk about future projects. So I think we'll mention the books first, and then maybe go with maybe Spider-Man and his Spider-Man and his friends. I think I'm saying that right.
Yes,
his
Spider-Man
amazing
and his
friends.
Amazing Friends.
Yes.
Yeah, Amazing Friends.
My husband's going to get me if I don't say that right. But
well, for the first book I wrote was a cookbook because I like to cook, and I've had a couple cooking shows on the YouTube and on different outlets. But it was the Family Affair cookbook. All these books are still available. They're all on my site, which is kathygarver.com, and they are also all on Amazon. But this is the Family Affair cookbook, and it takes each character and then the type of things that they would cook. So Mr. French cooked very gourmet food in this book, and I do sissy sizzle type things, and Buffy and Jody's chapter are very easy things to make, like ants on a limb, which is like raisins and cream cheese on celery, and Brian Keith's chapter, which is about cocktails. How to make a Manhattan since he was from New York, etc. And then the second book I wrote was Surviving Sissy, which is my memoir. Then I wrote Ex-Child Stars, Where Are They Now? And then I wrote holiday recipes for A Family Affair. And that every month, we have a holiday. So this gives like 3 different menus and the recipes for different things. So since it's June, July, 4th of July holidays, and vegetarian and poultry or meat. So it's really fun, and lots of pictures. Then the latest book that I have out is the Family Affair scrapbook, and that's really very colorful. Lots of pictures, memorabilia. They have lots of pictures of Mrs. Beasley and lunch boxes and things that were just coming into the fore when Family Affair emerged. And now I'm working on another book that should be out this year called Romancing with the Stars with my co-author, Doug Hartline. And it celebrates and heralds the longevity of certain relationships in Hollywood from television, from the 60s to the 90s. Those are hard to find, Rose. There aren't a lot of long relationships.
This is true.
You.
I mean, there's a few actors that I've seen that actually did last a long time. I think Tom Hanks actually had a really good relationship, from what I've seen. But you're right. A lot of times in Hollywood, like I said, when we mentioned that it can be I've not been in Hollywood working, but just from stories I've heard that it's very stressful. So I'm sure relationships are the same way. It's very stressful sometimes.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm happy to say I've been married 43 years, and he's a very nice man. I like my husband a lot, David, and we have one child. But Sherry Alberoni, that was a Mouseketeer, and she also played my friend.
Oh, yeah.
Sharon on my on Family Affairs. She's been married for a very long time to a very nice doctor, and she's in the book, and Ruta Lee's in the book, and Keith Thibodeau from I Love Lucy. So there are a lot, and it's like where they met, and what is their most romantic place, and then we have a little travel guide that goes along with it, so people that are reading the book can duplicate the experience.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I need to get that copy. I know I have your Family Affairs scrapbook, though, and I love it. I love anything that has fun collectibles in it, too. I love the pictures, and then I love the collectible items, like you were mentioning, because I'm a collector, so anything with collectible guides like that. And I don't know if I've showed you a picture of it, but is the Buffy Mattel doll that I showed you in that book, too? I don't know if I've looked for it.
Yes, I think it is. Now, that particular one was not made by Ashton Drake, and I just signed an agreement with Ashton Drake that I'm going to represent Mrs. Beasley. There are like 100,000 Mrs. Beasleys sold every year, and they are bringing out new ornaments. They brought out a new Mrs. Beasley last year, and she was such a big seller, and then they're bringing out a new one this year, and so I'm going to go to different shows, and you would love the little ornaments.
Oh, I know I would.
That is the exact duplicate of the big Mrs. Beasley, but she's a little stuffed ornament, and she says 11 things.
I'm going to have to get one of those off you if you're selling them.
Oh, yeah, they're adorable. And then there was one that they had brought out previously that was a glass-blown Mrs. Beasley ornament, and you know collectibles.
Yeah,
they only make a certain amount, and then they don't make any more.
Yes,
and I found that out after I wanted a Mrs. Beasley bobblehead, and nope, we don't do any more of those. But they brought out one that's very similar to the one that they had, but it's more sparkly, with like sparkle shoes and a little sparkly tie for her bib. So. But I'm eager to work with them because they are such a quality company. So that will be really a fun thing for me to do and for other people to see the neat things that they have.
I really want to keep in touch with you about this because I want to get some of the items you're going to be selling. I do want to say before we get too far along, if you have a website or any kind of information where people can contact you and buy this products off you, buy your books off you, anything like that, if you could give us that too. And we'll add it to the link whenever we're done with this because we're going to actually air it on the radio. And then we'll also be making a podcast of it where people can listen to it and they'll have a link to all of your information.
Yeah, that would be great. It's kathygarver.com is my website. And then there's up at the top, you can click on merchandise. And then it will have the things there. And also, I have a newsletter that comes out each month, and so they can sign up for the newsletter and see where I'll be and what I will have with me. And I'm also going to post that on my Instagram, which is at KGSissy.
And it'll be online too, so anyone can get a hold of it because this product is amazing. I mean, I'm a collector, like I said, and I don't know if I told you this whenever I saw you last year, but. You know, I was born in 1971. So my mom said the first couple years, I had this Mrs. Beasley that I carried around, dragged it around the house everywhere I went. You know, it was like my own little Buffy there, just rocking all around the house with these little pigtails in. And I couldn't have been more than 2 years old, she said, carrying around this Mrs. Beasley.
Oh, so. That's adorable. Well, we are working on a sequel called Aunt Sissy. And it's like in the realm of the way that a lot of the television series are doing now with 8 episodes. Mm-hmm. And so each season with the 8 episode is going to highlight different people and their origins. So how Mrs. Beasley, the doll, came to be. And she's based on a real person named Mrs. Beasley that was born in England. So that's a little teaser of one of the seasons. And then there's a season about me, Sissy, what happened to her, and then what happened to Buffy and Jody and Uncle Bill and Mr. French.
Yeah. And this is going to be on your website too, where we can follow you on social media and find out what's going on?
Yeah. And my Facebook page is my Kathy Garver fan page. You just put in Kathy Garver and it goes to the page.
Yeah, because I want to keep up with all this too, and I can always give a shout out whenever it's happening. But we're getting it all firsthand right now, so that's even better. We're getting everything right now. From
the horse's mouth.
Yeah, exactly. So we're getting it ahead of time. So I hope you don't mind in a couple weeks if this is airing, because it's all ahead of time, but they're going to be looking for it this way, and watching for it. And so I want to switch tunes since we've got probably about 15, 20 more minutes left of this interview where we talk about Spider-Man and his amazing friends. If you could share some stories with that and working with the voice acting talents of Frank Welker and let me see, Dan Gilvezan. I can't leave Dan out because Dan would get me. I have him on my text, so he probably would get me if I left him out.
Dan is a good friend of mine. He and his wife, they're responsible for a lot of my social doings because they live close to me, and his beautiful wife, Giselle, is always giving pool parties, or at Christmas there's a peppertini party, or she does clothes swaps with the ladies, or birthday luncheons. So it's a nice family, Dan and his wife, Giselle, and of course he's such a talent. And Frank Welker, who played Iceman, but I mean, he's one of the biggest names in the voiceover community because he's done so many shows and so many characters on Scooby-Doo and the Transformers and you name it. And we had a little reunion at the Transformers convention in January, and then I just did a Robo Toy Fest, and Dan should have been there, but he wasn't there. So I upheld our banner of Spider-Man and his amazing friends. But Rose, it's really interesting about the collectibles. And as I said, Mrs. Beasley was, just coming out last year. Mm-hmm. And this show is 60 years old. And Spider-Man was in the 80s. Yeah. But Disney bought Marvel, and, Disney always loves to do ancillary products and different kinds of things that go with the show. So there is a little action figure, a Firestar, my character, that's about 6 inches. Then there's one that's about 10 inches. And then they brought out a big statue that's 12 inches, and she's beautiful. And then they brought out, I was talking with, I forget who I was talking with. Oh, a collector that came to one of the shows a couple weeks ago. They have all 3 characters, and they decided, well, we're going to be really eco-friendly. So they put them in a box, a cardboard box with the pictures on them. And I said, well, have you opened your box? He says, no. I said, I'm afraid to open the box. I don't know what's going to be inside, and then maybe I'd wreck the how much it would cost. And so they said, and he told me, he said, yeah, they made a mistake. Instead of having the clear so you could see the characters, they put it in a cardboard box where you couldn't see the actual characters. So sometimes there's a hiccup along when you're trying to, manufacture these wonderful little action figures or whatever, or Funko Pops. I can't believe that Firestar is not a Funko Pop.
I can't believe that either, but I do know that, well, Tony and I collect, and I know he's got all 3 of the characters. He's got them on display in the living room. They're the little action figure ones, but he's got all 3. Because, that was a cartoon that I watched every Saturday morning. That was a cartoon Tony watched way before we even got, met each other. Because I don't know if you can kind of giggle a little bit here, but, Tony and I actually met at a Transformer convention in California.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, we were at a Transformer convention in 1997, and that's where we met. And we didn't date the first couple years, but then we were hooked, and we've been together since.
I love that. That's a great story, Rose.
Yeah.
Well, you never know what happens when you go to these conventions, but you find people that have similar interests, and that just kind of grows, and you keep in contact. I have met a lot of people, fans at my conventions, and they've become my best friends. And it's, there's something in common, and so that's, I think, what, obviously it brings people together.
Yeah, they're lifelong friends, and it's the same thing. It's the same thing with voice actors. I mean, I've met a lot of guys. I've met Michael Bell. I've met Corey Burton several times, and Dan Gilvezan. Every time I see him, I give him a big hug. I have met Frank, and I've seen some of the things he can do. Whenever we were in California, I met Corey Burton. You probably met Corey Burton before. He's done a lot of voices.
Actually, I have not.
You have not met Corey. Well,
No.
he is a character, but then Frank is too, because I was at a Transformer convention working it, being a volunteer, and I was in the green room with Frank, and Sue Blue was in there, if you've ever met Sue. And
Yeah, I know Sue Blue real well.
So what we were doing, we were sitting in there, and Sue had a little dog with her. And at one point, I came in the room, and there was barking, and I thought it was Sue's dog. I'm looking around, and here it's Frank barking. So, I mean, so
Frank can bark any breed of dog. he is just multi-talented. He's a little shy.
He was actually the dog, right? In Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends.
Yeah, Ms. Lion.
Yeah.
So he was the dog as well as Iceman.
And I heard that he can actually... Now, this is what I heard from Wally Burr, if you remember Wally Burr.
I do, yes.
He said that he could make the sound of a door opening, like a swoosh sound, and people actually believed it was a door opening.
Oh, yeah. It's real.
Yeah.
He just explored all the different facets of his personality and attached a voice to them, and it's natural. It's just natural. You have to be a little crazy to be a voice actor. I taught voice acting for about 20 years.
Oh.
You know, how to do characters, et cetera, but yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, besides teaching, I mean, I'm sure teaching it was an interesting affair, but I'm sure even working with these guys, they had you laughing, I'm sure, constantly.
Oh, yeah, we had good times in Spider-Man. And that was actually, I think, Dan's second job in voiceover. Frank and I had been working, and I'd been an actor since I was a child, but Dan was just getting his feet wet. But there's a certain innocence then that was perceived in his version of Spider-Man that I just think is terrific.
Yeah. How old, if you don't mind me asking, and probably I hope he doesn't mind my asking, how old was Dan at the time when he first started doing Amazing Friends?
He was great. He was just personable and amiable and malleable.
And he was
all
pretty
those,
young.
All those big words. And he was young. He was younger than me. He was, Frank and I are about the same age, but Dan was younger.
Yeah, I figured.
But you know, in voice acting, that's what's so cool, because you can be as young as you want, or you can be an old lady, or you can just be any age you want.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing. That's a fun thing.
And I will say this too, that whenever it comes to this kind of stuff, it's fun because when I'm working with the radio station now, I was just joking with a couple of my friends that I can be in my PJs and it won't matter because no one's seeing me.
I know, isn't it great?
It's amazing.
Yeah. So and now so many people just have studios in their house and they're doing their voiceovers in their jammies and maybe don't get. And my husband was like 11 o'clock. You're still in your pajamas. I said, I know that, David, but I do my exercises in my pajamas, and then I do stuff on my computer in my pajamas. So if I don't have to go any place out of the canyon, I don't. But I have been going places and doing things. I have 2 new movies that premiered last year, which was Old Man Jackson. I had to get up and get dressed.
So you had to get dressed for that one.
Yeah, we did that in Houston. That was really fun. Both of these are on Amazon now, Old Man Jackson and Yellowbird. And then at the beginning of this year, I did Christmas at Roanoke Ranch, which was fun because I got to ride a horse, which I liked. And then I did The Empty Church that just premiered a month ago at the Happy Trails Convention, and it will be going to some film festivals. This summer I'm going to do a movie with Charlene Tilton in Chicago called The Thing About Pickles, and that's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, so you're really keeping active too. You're very busy.
I know it.
I have a question for you too, and I heard rumor, and I don't know if we mentioned this. I don't think we've mentioned this. Are you going to be starting something collectors-wise? Because I heard that you're going to be either doing a collector's show or something that might be involved in like people that collect items.
Right. So we have this pilot, and I'm going to be the host, and we go to different people. We either Zoom or we actually go to interview people about their collections, how they got into collecting, what they like the best, and there is a trading aspect of the show, and so we're still working on that to see where we're going to put it. But we would love to come and interview you, Rose, and see your fabulous collections of things.
I'm excited about that because, like I said, not to be all about me because it's more about you, but like I said, my husband and I, we met through collecting Transformers. We met, we both love G.I. Joe, we love Transformers, He-Man, anything from the 70s and 80s. But for the last 5 years, I've been very heavy on Barbie. Very heavy. I've got Barbies that date back from the number 3 from 1961, going all the way up to around 1995. And I've probably got about 250, maybe more, in Barbies right now. I'm trying to find rooms to put them because there's just not enough space. And
Wow.
I'm very passionate about it.
What did you think of the movie and Margot Robbie?
I actually liked it. It wasn't so much, I thought the acting was great, but I liked the references to a lot of the dolls I actually own. And I was watching it and pointing out, I've got that one, I've got that one, I've got that one. And there was one scene where they have, from 1975, they have the growing up Skipper. And I just jumped for joy when I saw that one mentioned on the movie. So for me, it was more of a collector's thing where I was just so excited. And when I heard that you were going to be doing a collector show, I got very excited about that too. And I hope to hear from it, and I would love to be a part of it in any way I can, because this is exciting for me. It's exciting that you're doing this, and it's exciting to see it happening.
Thank you. Well, a lot of people collect different things, and that's what's so fascinating, that is like kind of this human condition, that you see something that you really like that brings you pleasure, and that it just grows and grows, and it's one of the few things, as you probably know, that gains in value, that especially during our inflationary times, when things are going down and it's harder to buy things, and some things are not holding their value except for food, that collectibles not only hold their value but go up. And so that's the good aspect besides the joy it brings. Those are the good things about collectibles.
I agree. And you know what? Whenever life gets stressful, I always feel like that's something you can go to too. Something you can enjoy privately or with friends. And it's, if you're having a stressful week, like sometimes I will, knowing that I can go out and collect or do something that I enjoy, it's like everyone. Life needs this. I don't care. My aunt used to tell me all the time when I was a kid, hey, you need to grow up. And I said, you know what? This is my life. I enjoy it. And I don't care how old I get. I'm going to enjoy collecting. As long as I can do it, I'm going to be doing it.
Absolutely. I mean, people collect until they are no longer with us.
Yeah.
And gone to the great beyond. And then they leave it to their children or whatever. But all that time, all the way up to them, they've enjoyed it.
It's what life's about, enjoying yourself, having a good time, making the best of everything.
And I certainly have enjoyed this conversation. It's always great to talk with you, Rose.
And
you know, we have a lot in common, and we both like to talk, so it's always fun.
know how much I've enjoyed this, and I love the fact that you've joined us with Retro Talk. I've loved having you on Retro Talk. You're amazing. I can't thank you enough. Can I send you some Barbie pictures sometimes?
Oh, please do. Yes, I'd love to see them.
I would love to share it, and you let me know what's going on with that show, because I'm actually gonna. If you want me there, I'm excited to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
All right, I'm sending you some hugs and love.
Okay, thank you, Rose.
Bye.
You've been listening to
Retro Talk with Retro Rose.
here on
98.5 WXPM.
Be back next week, same time, same channel.
Remember the music? Remember the movies? Remember the cars, the fashions, the news, the things that stood out during our youth? It's okay to be nerdy. Join me as I reminisce over the cartoons, the toys, and the video games of the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Turn back the clock with Retro Talk.
Weekends on 98.5 XPM's $1 Million Weekend lineup.